Hey everyone, Noir here. Let's get into today's Reddit story.
The day my dad called me the son he wished had never been born changed everything. He said it in a voice message to my uncle after he asked why I had not been home in so long. When I finally heard it, I only had one response. Isn't that what you wanted? He never expected me to hear those words, but once I did, nothing in my life was ever the same. The message was only 9 seconds long. I know because I have timed it. I have listened to it so many times that I could repeat every word in my sleep. Some nights I probably do, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me explain how it all started. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, about 45 minutes north of Nashville. It was a nice town with friendly people, Friday night football, and church every Sunday. My dad, Victor, owned a small home remodeling business. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at a dental office. She always had dinner ready by 6 o'clock and a glass of sweet tea in her hand a few minutes later. Back then, I believed I had good parents. I have one older brother, Mason. He is 3 years older than me. Growing up, Mason was always the favorite. He was the quarterback, the homecoming king, and the one whose school pictures were proudly displayed in the hallway. Mine stayed in a drawer because my mom kept saying she had not bought a frame yet. Mason earned a full scholarship to the University of Tennessee. When I left for community college, I got a handshake and a simple good luck. I am not saying my parents did not love me. They packed my lunches, came to school events, and signed permission slips. But there was always an invisible difference between the way they treated Mason and the way they treated me. I spent most of my 20s pretending I did not notice. I remember one Christmas when I was about 14. Mason opened a brand new laptop, and my dad made a huge event out of it. He saved it for last and recorded everything with his camcorder. I got a GameStop gift card and a sweater that was one size too big. My mom smiled and said I would grow into it. I wore it once just to be polite, then shoved it into the back of my closet. I thanked them, went to my room, and played my new game while Mason set up his laptop at the kitchen table. My dad stood beside him the whole time like the proudest father in the world. Family gatherings were always about Mason. My dad replayed his football highlights every Thanksgiving. Mason got a car for his 16th birthday. I got a used bike and a card that said, "Pedal toward your dreams." I am pretty sure my mom found it on the clearance rack at Dollar General. I never complained. I figured that if I worked hard enough, they would eventually notice me. I went to community college, earned my associate degree in business, then transferred to Austin Peay State University to finish my bachelor's degree. I paid for most of it myself with student loans and a part-time job at a hardware store. While Mason enjoyed college life in Knoxville with his tuition paid for, I spent my evenings stocking shelves and eating ramen several nights a week. I never really blamed Mason. He was not a bad brother. He was just completely unaware. He grew up as the golden child and never realized I was always trying to prove I mattered. After college, I moved to Nashville and took an operations job at a logistics company. It was not glamorous, but I was good at it. Within 2 years, I had earned 2 promotions and was managing a team of 12 people. I rented a small apartment in East Nashville and started dating a woman named Hannah, who worked at a music publishing company downtown. For the first time, life finally felt like it was coming together. The problem with growing up as the overlooked kid is that you spend your whole life trying to prove you are good enough. Even after you succeed, there is always a voice telling you it is still not enough. That voice sounded a lot like my dad. Victor was always around, but he was never really present. Every Sunday I called home and told him about my promotion, my apartment, or Hannah. He always answered the same way. "That's great, bud." No excitement, no questions, no pride. Then I would hear him talking to my Uncle Raymond, bragging about Mason's new truck, or Mason getting engaged to his college girlfriend Abigail, like buying a Ford F-150 was the greatest achievement in the world. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was just being too sensitive. Maybe some dads just were not good with words. I made every excuse I could, because I was not ready to admit my own father did not see me the way I needed him to. Then came the barbecue. Actually, I was not even there. It was a Saturday in late June. I was sitting in my car outside a Kroger in Nashville, about to buy groceries for a dinner party Hannah and I were hosting. She had just texted me a shopping list when my phone buzzed. It was a voice message from my dad. That was strange because he never sent voice messages. He was the type to call, talk for a minute, say, "All right then," and hang up. I pressed play. At first I heard laughter, country music, and the sound of a grill. Then my dad's voice. Calm, casual. "Between us, I wish Ethan never happened." Then he laughed. Just a small chuckle. That was it. 9 seconds. I sat there staring at my phone. Hannah's grocery list was still on the screen. Cherry tomatoes, fresh basil. I remember those details because my mind was trying to focus on something normal while everything else fell apart. I listened to the message again and again. There was no doubt it was meant for my Uncle Raymond. My dad had accidentally sent it to me instead. I stayed in my car for almost 30 minutes. The engine was off, the windows were up, and the heat kept building. But I never moved. I just kept hoping another message would come saying it was all a joke. It never came. I drove home, told Hannah I was not feeling well, and stayed in the bedroom while she handled the dinner party alone. She knew something was wrong, but she did not push me. After that, I stopped calling home. Not that Sunday, not the next one. Never again. For the next 2 weeks, every morning started the same way. For a few seconds, I felt normal. Then those words came back. "Between us, I wish Ethan never happened." Hannah noticed I had changed. I was quiet, distracted, and distant. She kept asking if I was okay, but I could not tell her the truth. How do you tell your girlfriend your own father wishes you had never been born? 3 weeks later, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She said she just wanted to make sure I was okay. Her voice sounded so normal that it hurt even more. I kept wondering if she already knew how my dad really felt. Then Mason texted me. "Hey, you coming over for the 4th of July? Abigail's making her potato salad. It's actually good this year." I never replied. He had no idea one accidental 9-second voice message had completely changed my life. By July, my family realized something was wrong. Mom kept calling and texting. "Ethan, please call me. Your dad and I are worried." That almost made me laugh. The man who wished I had never been born was worried? Then Dad called. I watched his name appear on my screen. I did not answer. He never left a voicemail. Hannah finally confronted me one Thursday night in the middle of July. We were sitting on the couch with the television on, but neither of us was paying attention. She muted it, looked at me, and said, "Ethan, I love you, but something is really wrong. Please tell me what's going on." So I did. I opened the voicemail, handed her my phone, and watched her listen. She played it twice before carefully setting the phone on the coffee table. Then she looked at me and said, Say something before I throw this phone through the wall. I told her everything. How Mason had always come first. How he got a car while I got a bike. How my dad barely reacted whenever I shared good news, but treated Mason's achievements like they were extraordinary. By the time I finished, Hannah was crying. I wasn't. I had gone numb. She held my hand and said, "You deserve better than this." The truth was, I did not believe her. That voicemail confirmed every fear I had carried for years. I was not imagining the favoritism. I was not being too sensitive. I really was the unwanted son. By August, my family started pushing harder. My mom even began calling Hannah, asking if I was okay. Hannah politely told her I needed some space, and for a while my mom backed off. Then Mason showed up at our apartment without warning. He knocked on the door early Saturday morning and immediately asked, "What is going on with you? Mom's worried, Dad's acting strange, you're ignoring everyone." For a second, I almost played him the voicemail, but I stopped myself. I did not think he would understand. Mason had never known what it felt like to wonder whether our parents actually wanted him. So I simply said, "I'm fine. Work's been busy." He looked at me like he knew I was lying. "You're not fine. I appreciate you coming," I told him, "but I need some space." He stood outside for another minute before leaving. After I watched his truck drive away, I sat on the kitchen floor with my head in my hands. That was the closest I came to crying. The real breaking point came in September. My mom sent a group text with a photo from my Uncle Raymond's lake house. Everyone was smiling. My dad had his arm around Mason, and behind them was a Happy Labor Day banner. The caption read, "Wish you were here, Ethan. We missed you." I stared at my dad's smile. He did not look like a man who regretted losing his son. He looked perfectly happy. I saved the picture. Then I looked at the screenshot of the voicemail. After that, I opened my notes app and typed 2 words. Move on. That night, I told Hannah I was done. Not with her. With my family. I was done waiting for my dad to become someone he never would be. Done pretending I was okay with always coming second. Done hoping that one more achievement would finally make him proud of me. Hannah squeezed my hand and smiled. "Then we'll move on together." And we did. The next few months were harder than I expected. When you cut ties with your own family, people act like you're the one who did something wrong. Before long, mutual friends started asking questions. Extended family started reaching out. They sent texts like, "Life is short. Family is everything." Easy to say when your family never accidentally admitted they wished you had never been born at a backyard barbecue. Uncle Raymond texted me once. Just once. "Your dad loves you, Ethan. He's just not very good at showing it." I read that message over and over, wondering if Raymond knew about the voicemail. Was he standing there when my dad said, "I wish Ethan never happened"? Did he just laugh and move on like it was nothing? I never replied. What was I supposed to say? "Thanks, Raymond. Is that how he shows his love?" Instead, I buried myself in work. I threw everything I had into my job at the logistics company. My boss, Melissa, noticed the difference. One afternoon, she pulled me aside and said, "I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but whatever is driving you, it's working. I'm recommending you for regional operations lead." I got the promotion. It came with a 30% raise and responsibility for operations across 3 states. I was 29 years old, making more money than my dad had ever made in his best year. and I had nobody to call. No Sunday phone call, no flat, "That's great, bud." Just Hannah and me eating Thai takeout, drinking cheap champagne, and celebrating together. Honestly, her being proud of me was enough. She had a way of looking at me that made me feel important, and after spending my whole life feeling invisible at home, that meant everything. A few months later, we bought a house in Franklin, just outside Nashville. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. Hannah planted a vegetable garden, I built a fire pit, and we adopted a goofy black lab mix named Cooper, who believed every piece of furniture belonged to him. For the first time, I felt like I had a real home. The emotional healing took longer. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Bennett. I told him about the voicemail, the years of favoritism, and how numb I had become. He listened quietly before saying, "Ethan, you're grieving the father you wanted, not the father you had. That's a real loss." That hit me harder than I expected. He helped me realize I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place I was never going to get. I kept hoping my dad would finally notice me, but he was always looking past me at Mason. The voicemail was not the wound. It simply proved the wound had been there all along. Little by little, I stopped chasing my family's approval. I reconnected with old college friends and made new ones at work. One of them, Cole, became like the brother I never had. He was a former Marine from Memphis who understood complicated families, and we spent many Friday evenings talking over beers about life instead of pretending everything was fine. In November, I proposed to Hannah on our front porch, while Cooper sat between us chewing on a stick. She said yes before I even finished asking. We planned a small wedding at a vineyard outside Franklin with about 30 guests. No one from my side of the family was invited. I did not want to spend my wedding wondering whether my dad would show up and fake being proud of me after saying he wished I had never been born. Instead, Hannah's parents filled that space. Walter and Susan treated me like family from the day we met. Walter, a retired electrician, loved fishing and terrible jokes. Susan was the kind of mom who called after every storm just to make sure everything at the house was okay. They could never replace what I had lost, but they showed me what a loving family was supposed to look like. By the time spring arrived, my life and I were in a completely different place. I'd been recruited by a bigger logistics company in Nashville and offered a director-level position with equity and a salary that almost didn't seem real. I accepted the offer. Hannah and I were busy planning the wedding. Cooper had finally stopped chewing sticks and started chewing shoes instead, which somehow felt like progress. Life was good, not perfect. I still had nights when I'd wake up at 3 in the morning wondering if my dad ever thought about what he had said. But overall, life was finally steady. Then Mason called. We had not spoken in almost a year. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Ethan," he said. His voice was different, serious, no jokes, no casual man or dude, just my name. "Dad's business is in trouble," he said. "Real trouble." He explained that Dad had borrowed money the year before to expand into commercial construction. The project had fallen apart. The client backed out. Subcontractors were suing, and Dad owed the bank around $350,000. He might lose the house. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at Cooper rolling around in the backyard, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just silence. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Mason hesitated. "Because he's too proud to ask for help, but he needs it, and you're doing well now. Mom told me about the new job." Then he said the words I had wanted to hear my whole life. We're all really proud of you." I almost laughed. After everything, those words finally came only because they needed something from me. "I'll think about it," I said. Then I hung up. For a long time, I just stood there listening to Cooper bark at a squirrel. I thought about what Dr. Bennett had told me. I was not angry anymore. I was simply done. And sometimes being done is stronger than being angry. For the next 2 weeks, I did nothing. Hannah knew something was bothering me, but she waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told her everything, she listened quietly before asking, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do," she said. "You're just afraid of what that says about you." She was right. What I wanted to do was nothing. I wanted my dad to deal with the consequences of his own choices, just like I had lived with the weight of that voicemail every day. But I also felt guilty, because no matter what he had said, he was still my father. Somewhere inside me was still the little boy who wanted his dad to be proud of him. I called Dr. Bennett and scheduled an emergency session. I talked almost the entire time. When I finished, he said something I never forgot. "You don't owe anyone your help, Ethan, but you owe yourself the truth. Whatever you decide, make sure it comes from clarity, not revenge." That helped. A few days later, I met my friend Cole for a beer and told him everything, the voicemail, cutting off my family, and Mason's call. He listened quietly before saying, "You need to see your dad face to face." "What?" "Not for him. For you. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened." I knew he was right. But before I went, I wanted to know exactly what I was walking into. So I started asking questions. A friend from college who worked in commercial real estate looked into my dad's business. The truth was even worse than Mason had described. Dad had personally guaranteed the loan, which meant the bank could take everything, the house, the equipment, even his savings. The commercial project had been far beyond what his company could handle. The client walked away. 3 subcontractors filed liens, and the business was sinking fast. Then I found out one more thing. Mason had co-signed part of the loan. He was in trouble too. Suddenly, Mason's phone call made a lot more sense. He was not just calling because he cared about me. His own financial future was tied to Dad's failing business, and he needed someone to save them. That changed everything. Not because it made me less willing to help, but because it showed me what this really was. It was not a family coming together during a crisis. It was a family that had ignored me for years, only to realize the forgotten son was the only one left standing. Over the next week, I prepared. One evening, Hannah and I sat down and went through our finances. We were doing well. Between my new job, her income, and our savings, we had a comfortable cushion. Whatever I decided to do, I was not going to put our future at risk. We agreed on clear boundaries before I made any decision. I also wrote a letter, not to send, to read. I wrote down everything I had wanted to tell my dad over the past year, and really, over the past 20 years. The bike instead of the car. The flat, "That's great, bud." The way he bragged about Mason while introducing me as my other son. The Christmas with the laptop and the oversized sweater. Every achievement that went unnoticed. And finally, the 9-second voicemail that confirmed everything I had feared. I practiced reading the letter out loud in our bedroom, while Cooper sat on the floor with his head tilted, looking completely confused. It helped. By the time I finished, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. The plan was simple. I would drive to Clarksville on Saturday, sit down with my dad alone, say everything I needed to say, listen to his side, and then decide what to do. No promises, no money, not until we talked. If he wanted my help, he would have to do something he had never done before. Be honest with me. Hannah drove with me. She waited at a coffee shop while I went to the house alone. Before I got out of the car, she kissed me and said, "You're the strongest person I know. Whatever happens, I'm here." I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. Everything looked the same. The white siding, the blue shutters, the cracked driveway Dad always said he would fix. Even Mom's garden gnomes were still standing by the front walk. The house had not changed. I had. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone with the voicemail still saved on it, and walked to the front door. I stood there for a second before knocking. Inside, the television went silent. Then I heard footsteps. Dad opened the door. He looked older, thinner. His hair had turned grayer, and the dark circles under his eyes were impossible to miss. He stared at me for a moment. "Hey, Dad," I said. He hesitated before quietly saying, "Ethan, come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled exactly the way I remembered: coffee, sawdust, and old carpet. Mom was not home. I had planned it that way. She volunteered at the church food pantry on Saturday mornings, and I wanted this conversation to be just between Dad and me. We sat down at the kitchen table where I had spent so much of my childhood. Dad offered me coffee. I said no. He poured himself a cup with slightly shaking hands and sat across from me. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I took out my phone, placed it on the table, and opened the voicemail. "Before we talk about anything else," I said, "I need you to listen to this." Then I pressed play. The sound of the barbecue filled the kitchen. Laughter, country music, the grill. Then my dad's voice. "Between us, I wish Ethan never happened." Then the laugh. 9 seconds. When it ended, the kitchen went completely silent. My dad's face turned white. Not red, not angry, just completely drained, like all the blood had left his body. He stared at my phone without saying a word. "That message was sent to me by accident," I said calmly. "Last June. You meant to send it to Uncle Raymond. You were at a barbecue, and you told your brother you wished your own son had never been born." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Ethan, let me finish." I had practiced this conversation so many times that the words came naturally. I spent my whole life trying to earn what Mason got without even trying. Your attention, your respect, your pride. I watched you brag about him to everyone while you barely knew what I did for a living. I paid my own way through school while you paid for his. I called you every Sunday for years, and you never once asked me a single follow-up question. I kept telling myself that was just who you were, that you weren't good with words. I made excuse after excuse because I didn't want to admit my own father didn't think I was worth his time. He kept staring at the table. His eyes filled with tears, but he still said nothing. Then I heard that voicemail. You didn't say I disappointed you. You didn't say you were angry. You said you wished I never happened, like I was a mistake. And then you laughed. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Why? He looked up at me. For the first time in my life, he did not look strong. He looked broken. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't have an answer that will make this right. Try." He took a long breath. "You were always independent, Ethan. Even when you were little, you handled everything yourself. Mason always needed me for coaching, money, advice. I got used to being needed. You never asked. So I convinced myself you were fine. He paused. But the truth is, I was lazy. I took the easy road. I gave my attention to the kid who demanded it, and I let the quiet one figure things out alone. Eventually, the distance between us became so big that I didn't know how to fix it. So I stopped trying. He looked down again. And what I said to Raymond, he whispered. That was cowardice. I was angry about the business, angry that you hadn't called in months. Instead of taking responsibility, I blamed you. I said something unforgivable behind your back. He wiped his eyes. It wasn't nothing, Ethan. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I sat there for a long time. Not because I was deciding whether to forgive him. I had already made that decision before I came. I just wanted to hear him finally acknowledge everything. Then I spoke. Here's what's going to happen. I'm not writing you a check today. I'm not fixing a problem that you and Mason created. What I will do is put you in touch with a financial advisor I trust. His name is Adrian. He specializes in struggling small businesses. If there's a way to save this without putting my future at risk, I'll consider helping. But there are conditions. Dad nodded without interrupting. First, you start therapy. Second, we don't pretend this never happened. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it's going to be honest. And third, you tell Mason exactly what you said. His face changed immediately. I could see the shame, and I could also see that he still wanted to protect the golden child from the truth. He nodded slowly, like a man agreeing to a surgery he knew he needed. Okay, he said quietly. We both stood. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the same kitchen table where I had spent so much of my childhood feeling invisible. Then he said, I never should have said those words. You're the best thing I never deserved. I didn't hug him. I wasn't there yet. I simply nodded. We'll see, I said. Then I left. I met Hannah at the coffee shop. She was sitting in a booth with 2 lattes watching the door. I told her everything. He cried. He apologized. He admitted he had been a coward. Do you believe him? She asked. I believe he's ashamed, I said. Whether that turns into real change, I don't know. But I finally said everything I needed to say. For the first time in a year, I was no longer carrying that weight. We drove home to Franklin that afternoon. Cooper greeted us like we'd been gone for months instead of a few hours. That evening, I sat on our porch with a glass of sweet tea, looking at the backyard, the fire pit I had built, and the garden Hannah had planted. It was the life we had built together. No one's approval had created it, not even my dad's. To his credit, Dad started therapy. He's been going for about 8 months now. After he told Mason about the voicemail, Mason called me. He was quiet for a long time before saying, I had no idea. I'm sorry I never saw it. I told him that was the point. Nobody sees favoritism when they're the one benefiting from it. Adrian helped Dad restructure his debt and work things out with the subcontractors. I paid part of the legal fees, not because I owed my dad anything, but because it was the right thing to do, and I could afford it without putting my own family at risk. Mason paid his share too. For once, the burden was shared equally. Hannah and I got married that April at the vineyard in Franklin. 34 guests. Cooper was our ring bearer, and it went about as well as you would expect. Dad came. He sat in the second row and cried through most of the ceremony. During the reception, he pulled me aside and quietly said, "I'm proud of you, Ethan. I should have told you that a long time ago." I looked at him and answered, "Yeah, you should have." But this time I smiled, because I was no longer that kid sitting in a hot car outside Kroger, replaying a 9-second voicemail and wondering what was wrong with him. I was a husband, a homeowner, a man with a career, a dog, and a life I had built with my own hands. I had done it without my father's approval, without his pride, and without his permission. If he wanted to be part of that life now, he would have to earn his place in it. One day at a time.